Hello, it's the Great Canadian Bagel here, coming to you with another update to the U.S. 2022 midterm House of Representatives election. Now, I will just start this with the note, I have found a bug that's been fixed, and I've made a very large change to the model based off of some projects I'm doing for state-level races, and also the current Quebec election in Canada going on. To start with, the bug that has been fixed is, to long story short, so I don't go too much in the depths of the algorithm here, I was double counting the wrong demographics. I effectively was saying Hispanics are the exact same as black people, which is not, as white people, which is not correct. That's not what I wanted to do. I have fixed that. There's some other complications to go with that, but that's the main gist there. I just pointed to the wrong number. Secondly, I have tweaked how I'm handling area type, in other words, urban, suburban, rural. I have both increased the weight of it, so in essence, it matters more now. And I've also reduced the threshold of population density that I'm considering in urban riding, because in experiments around, I've noticed that there's quite a few counties that I don't think anyone would describe anything but as urban in practice, but they're very big counties or very big districts, so they have a low population density relative to the population. For example, Phoenix in Maricopa County, clearly a very urban city. Maricopa County is very big, so the population density is actually quite low, but almost everyone in Maricopa County lives in Phoenix. So I've tweaked that. I reserve the right to tweak it going forward because I'm still not very happy with it. This is a newer addition to the model based off of the Ontario provincial election in May, so I'm still not terribly happy with it, but I am tweaking it, and I feel like this was an improvement to the model. So I'm content for now, but I reserve the right to improvement, so I would not draw the seat changes or popular vote changes right now. I would not draw any conclusions from this one to the last update. I will go through what has changed, but I would not read this as a change in anything meaningful. I would not look at this and be like, yes, the Democrats are gaining ground, the Republicans are losing ground. I don't think that's accurate because I fundamentally changed the model by fixing a bug and changing an attribute. So this result is not cogent on the last result. In reality, the last result probably would have spit this exact thing out if I had those changes earlier, or similar to this, if I fixed those earlier. So, were the earlier results wrong? Yeah, probably. Turns out not extremely wrong, but they were probably wrong. That's what happens when you have bugs and you change your modeling. I will also note, again, there are some states, mostly ones that have lost seats like Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, where I'm not entirely enthused with my approximation for the new electoral districts, because again, the U.S. doesn't publish the new demographics of the districts until after the election for some reason. So I am going to reapproximate them like I have done to Illinois, but it will take a while and there's priority lists. But I've come up with methods to make that faster, so hopefully it won't be too bad. The next one probably is going to be Pennsylvania. I know some people have said Florida or Texas, but I have unrelated reasons why I want to do Pennsylvania first. I'll also note to that, again, if reading your name, I really apologize because you are a frequent commenter and this is poor practice, but Illinois has actually gained another Democrat seat, which is what you were thinking earlier, so yeah, it turns out you were right. Even more. So what has changed since the last update? Well, generally speaking, the Northeast is a bit bluer, like Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey. In New Jersey, the Democrats have actually gained a seat. However, New York, the Democrats have gained vote share but have lost a seat. They've probably lost one in upstate New York, but have gained more vote share in New York City itself. So their vote is more concentrated but less useful. Similarly, or not similarly, sorry, the Republicans have gained a seat in Pennsylvania, but have also gained vote share, so different there. Moving into the Midwest, the Republicans have lost a seat in Michigan and lost a bit of vote share. They've lost a seat in Iowa, but gained a bit of vote share. Democrats have gained vote share and a seat in Illinois. There's been vote share tweaks in most other states too in the Midwest. Into the South, the Democrats have gained a seat and the Republicans have lost vote share in Virginia. Republicans have lost vote share in North Carolina. And everything else is relatively the same within margin of error, so not that exciting. Into the West, Republicans have lost vote share in Colorado, and one of these seats is actually very, very close to flipping Democrat. They've gained vote share in New Mexico, which might just be an anomalous result of the model, because you can only model with such precision. I actually think this one is wrong, but I'm not going to proactively change what the model says, because I think it's wrong. I don't know how to fix this, because I think this is a result of New Mexico being very rural, but I don't actually think New Mexico is going to vote this way, so it's just a red herring thrown by the model. Sometime I might be able to resolve this, but I'm not confident. I'm actually the opposite of, I think this is wrong, so we'll see that going forward. Nevada, the Republicans have lost vote share, and I actually feel more confident about Nevada's result now. Before, their Republicans were leading by a decent amount, which didn't feel likely. Now they're narrowly leading, which feels more likely to me. The Democrats have gained a seat in West Virginia and vote share, and they have gained vote share and are close to gaining a seat in Oregon. Very, very close. I think it's one of these ones over here, because the two eastern ones are Republican, and there's, I think, one in the south right here, which is close. I'd double check. I have the statewide map, not electoral districts, but I believe it's this one is on the brink. I might be wrong. Don't quote me on that. So, we've had a lot of changes here. You might be asking yourselves, what can we figure out from this? Is this not just useless? What else can you do and talk about here? Well, there's a lot I can talk about, because I don't think anything I said before is actually wrong. I think my analysis has been relatively correct. It's just the model's been slightly erroneous. Because keep in mind, we'll pull up the raw data here. Even last update, which was August 14th, according to this, we're only talking about an 8-seat swing, which is significant, but not the end of the world, and only about, the Republicans lost about 1 percentage point to popular vote, and the Democrats have gained about a half. So a 1.5% popular vote swing and an 8-seat swing. So not huge. And actually, if you compare it to the start of the model, we're really not that far off from the start. So there's that. So what does this all mean, right? So what's going on? Why? Is it likely that the Republicans are going to actually keep going? Because there's been a lot of discussion, notably among Republican or conservative-leaning media people, that the Republicans are going to blow this, or that they are doing the wrong thing, or they're campaigning too hard on MAGA or other things like that. Notably, Ben Shapiro was commenting that as the Republicans focus more on Trump and the after effects of the FBI raid, they're going to take damage in the polls. And, well, frankly, he's wrong on that. That there isn't any evidence in the polls saying that that is happening. There's some movement in the polls, for sure, but the movements are mostly within the margin of error, and there's a spread. There's some pollsters, like Economist / YouGov. Economist is the purchaser of the polls. YouGov is the pollster. and Politico Morning Consult, which are showing decent Democrat leads. And then there's other ones like Trafalgar, Rasmussen, which are showing large Republican leads. And some other ones like Emerson, which are showing a minor Republican lead. And I believe you could throw Big Data poll in there as well with a minor Republican lead. I have to double check those numbers, but that's what the top of my head. So why is there this spread, right? Some people have looked at this spread, which has increased because back in June, Morning Consult / Politico Morning Consult and Economist YouGov were much closer to the Rasmussen Trafalgar numbers. So why has it changed so much? Well, I can't comment on Morning Consult Politico. I've looked at their polls a lot, and I don't really see anything inherently wrong with the poll. They seem to be weighting things reasonably. They seem to have good sample sizes. And they seem to be asking the vote question before asking other questions, which is generally how you should do it. You could ask the vote question, then ask a bunch of other issue questions, then ask the vote question again to see if that changed people's opinions. But you generally should ask vote question before asking other questions, other than maybe identification questions like where you're from and stuff like that. It's possible in how their methodology in sampling people is biasing people. Very possible. But I can't verify their sampling methods. But otherwise, the poll doesn't seem to be intentionally skewed. It's very different than everyone else, other than YouGov. But, that's what it is. YouGov Economist polls, though, the big issue with those is it really just looks like that they're not weighting the polls. So YouGov will sample primarily, or these days we'll have let's say 500 Democrats in sample, 400 independents in sample, and 300 Republicans, plus or minus some on every category. If you were to do it honestly, you would weight it so it's roughly 36 to 38% Democrat, 34 to 36% Republican, and everything else would be independent. According to what I've read, YouGov, after it does its surveys, doesn't do any weighting. It just passes on their raw data to the person paying for it, and they can weight it however they like. So in this case, it seems to be the economists not weighting the data. If you weight the data, you get a very different result. Notably, this is the easiest one, again, party affiliation. You weight it by actual party affiliation of likely voters based off of historical trends. Well, you get from a D+8 to a D+2 poll. Still significantly different than Rasmussen or Trafalgar, which are R+5 right now. But not as big. Okay, so we're there in that regard. So let's say we narrow down the polls. You'll still note, though, that even with that, there is still a change from June. Some people have said, the Republicans focused too hard on the FBI raid, or Dobbs has done something. No. What's likely to be happening, there's two possible explanations. You look at self-reporting in polls on the significance of the abortion decision, Dobbs. Republicans have actually gained enthusiasm from it, so that's it's not like they're less likely to vote now. They seem more likely to vote. And those who are really angry about it are all Democrats, and their voting enthusiasm doesn't seem to have increased. So it's not only going to increase Democrat turnout, though it might make Democrats more Democrat, if that makes sense. So it might keep the Democrats in the Democrat Party. But for among independents, which is really the demographic that matters the most for who's going to win an election, independents are pretty much unaffected by it. And in fact, I think they're probably edging on supporting the decision. I wouldn't categorically say that, but that That is what the vibe I'm getting from the polls I've looked at. Okay. FBI rate? Well, it's wildly increased Republican voting enthusiasm. Like, completely and utterly increased it. It hasn't increased Democrat enthusiasm. It hasn't increased independent enthusiasm. And there's very little evidence that it's turned away independents from the Republicans. And in fact, there's a lot of evidence right now that the independents are still souring on Biden. There was a recent update. I believe Biden is now negative 40 approval with independents. So he's still losing ground in that demographic. And midterms are typically a referendum on the incumbent president. Are you doing a good job? Do we like you? If you're doing a good job, you might keep the House or the Senate. Rarely both. If people really don't like you, you're probably going to lose both. No matter what Senate map you're looking at. And this Senate map is typically, I would say, unfavorable to the Republicans. But with that, just looking at the overall trends, I think it's going to be very unlikely the Republicans will, or the Democrats will hold both. And it's very likely Republicans will actually take both, though the House is almost a given. The Senate's the interesting one here. But we're covering Senate races later this month and next month, so bear with me on that one. So what is the explanation for the change then? I've just ruled out the two biggest ones people are talking about. Well, my money is it's a combination of time and seasonal polling bias. Summer polls generally get different results than polls in other times. People are paying less attention to politics, people are going on vacations, people are busy, they're, especially parents, their kids are home, so they have less time to fill out surveys or really think about politics because they have to entertain and have their kids do stuff because otherwise their kids will be running amok. So that's a factor. And there's also kind of a fatigue because the spring was such a dramatic period of time. I think people got fatigued and started paying less attention. And there's also kind of a normalcy bias. So the more crazy things get, normalcy is the wrong word. There's only so crazy things can get for people just start lapsing on the craziness of things and they start normalizing it in their brain. Does that mean it's going to change their voting preference on election day? I don't think so, but it means people are more thinking and less viscerally answering. In other words, when inflation was still rocketing up and all the bad stuff was happening in early June, I think a lot of people were suggesting they're going to vote Republican who weren't actually going to vote Republican. I don't think it's a case Republicans have lost ground. I think it's a case voters were noting Republican on polls to express dissatisfaction, not because they were going to vote that way. This is a very important distinction. People make this mistake a lot when they're looking at polls, especially those who don't look at polls frequently. Polls are not always, I'm going to vote this way, especially if you're very far from an election. It can also just be you announcing your displeasure with the current government. Does that mean that's exactly what people are doing? No. But this is a trend that happens a lot. When really bad things are happening, if the government is perceived as helping, people will proactively support the government in polls more than they actually do in elections. If really bad things are happening and it's perceived the government is making it worse or causing the problem, people do the opposite. But then when you get to the ballot box and your decision is red or blue, well, then you actually think about, who do I actually want to govern the country? Makes sense. And I can actually point you to at least one historical example of this in recent memory. The 2021 Canadian election, the July polls had the Liberal Party up about +8 nationally. In Canada, the September 20th election day had the Conservatives up +1. There was a 9 percentage point swing in about 50 days. Is that saying that the Conservatives ran the world's best campaign and changed people's minds? No. What that's saying is a lot of people were saying they're supporting the Liberals because they think the Liberals were doing a good job with the COVID affair at the time. But then when it came to actually voting in the ballot box, they're like, if I have to affirmatively choose a new government, I don't want Trudeau. I want someone else. And that's, I think, kind of what was happening in June, in the June polls. People weren't saying, we want the Republicans in. They were saying, we're not happy with how the Democrats are running. But then when you actually give them a ballot option, some people are like, is that actually how we want to do it? There's other factors too, of course. You could argue the Republicans haven't been doing a great campaign so far, but also it is September 5th, and the election is, I think, November 2nd this year, or is it November 7th? I don't know. It's one of those 2 days. So there is plenty of time to go. We'll see. And also, during the primaries, you could argue people were more focused on the primary elections, which a lot were going on in August, and not so much on the national. How much that factors? I don't know, but it does factor. So, what should we expect going forward here? Well, no matter what the poll trend is showing, I think it's very silly to think the Republicans, barring a catastrophically bad campaign, could possibly lose the House. We can talk about the margin of the House, but the idea that they're going to lose the House is silly. Right now, this is plus 30 seats in the House for the Republicans. I think that's probably the lower end of it. We'll see going forward, but I'm not expecting them to actually go much further down than this. The reason for this, really, everything that could possibly go wrong for an incumbent is going wrong for the incumbent. You can argue whether it is actually Biden's fault or not, or how much culpability he has compared to the Federal Reserve, compared to other factors, compared to Congress even, because Congress is also being wildly inept. But it is safe to say, even if you don't think it is Biden's fault, that's not that relevant. Because when voters are going to the voting box, they're not voting, oh yes, this is Biden's fault, necessarily. They're more voting Biden and the Democrats, who are the party who control all three houses, haven't helped the problem. Okay. And that's a big hit for them. And that's really the thing going against it. The economy is in the poop. Inflation numbers are terrible. The U.S. is backing billions and billions of dollars to the Ukraine war, which is getting really unpopular among Americans. Well, the country's falling apart. Not saying the money the federal government is spending to help Ukraine would have actually been spent to help Jackson, Mississippi, but you do have major cities in the U.S. like Jackson, Mississippi, where their water plants are falling apart. I'm not going to get into why that happened, because that's out of the scope of this, but there are major infrastructure issues happening in the U.S., there's major economic issues happening in the U.S., and the federal government seems more focused externally than internally, and that generally rubs people the wrong way. There's also a growing rucor, that's not quite the right way to phrase that, but there's a growing discontent among a lot of Americans, especially a lot of parents, which is a very large percentage of the population, about how gender ideology is being taught, how critical race theory is being taught. There's been a lot of examples recently of medical practitioners supporting or encouraging very early transitions, which is extremely divisive, and a lot of independents really don't like this. Obviously, Republicans do not like this, but the independents are very souring on this, which is also hurting the Democrats. On the flip side, and I think this is actually helping the Republicans, there is this now insurgent America First movement basically taking over the party. What was the Bush establishment of the party is on its death throes, and the MAGA insurgency has basically taken over the party at this point. And I think that's actually helping the Republican Party. Because historically, the last 20 years, the establishmentary Republicans are pretty useless. Like, they don't really do anything. They had a trifecta in 2016 to 2018, and they couldn't overturn Obamacare, which what they campaigned on. So they heavily campaigned on overturning Obamacare, and they couldn't do it with a trifecta. That's embarrassing. There was a lot of talk on reforming Section 230. They had a trifecta. They couldn't do it. Why can't you do it with a trifecta? You control all three houses. And it's not even like it was the trifecta the current Democrats have, where it's the weakest version of the trifecta because they only have 50-50 Senate, so the VP can break ties. But in a 50-50 Senate, one senator like Joe Manchin, who doesn't like a bill, can end the bill. So it's more forgivable that Democrats can't get some agenda things done. Though I think actually in the long term, some of these agenda things actually would have hurt the Democrats more than helped them politically, but that's another question altogether. There's been some discussion among Republicans and Republican-leaning people that this insurgent America First movement is actually hurting the party, and I think that's just nonsense. You look at the candidates, the American First candidates have much more voter enthusiasm behind them. They have a more cogent, coherent message because they have an idea of what the future should be. You can disagree with their idea of what the future should be, but they clearly have a future idea. The problem with the old establishmentary Republicans is it wasn't very clear what they wanted. And that's one of the reasons why the Democrats have dominated congressional and senatorial elections for like the last 70 years, give or take. The core reason for that isn't because the Democrats are good at campaigning, the Republicans are bad at campaigning, per se, or the Americans like the Democrats more. The Democrats always had a clear vision of what America should be. Many people disagree with the Democrat vision. I would actually say minority of people support the Democrat vision in the U.S. based on what I've seen in polls. But they have a clear vision, and those who like that vision will vote for them. The Republicans have basically never had a clear vision, and they've always been on the defense against what the Democrats are doing. The Democrats want to do X, and the Republicans are like, let's not do that. But honestly, people don't vote for let's not do that. That's not how you get encouraged. That's not how you have enthusiasm. That's not how you have excitement. You look at Republicans who actually have a clear vision and are actually doing something. For example, Ron DeSantis in Florida. You can disagree with what he's doing, but he clearly has a vision for what he wants to do, and he's actively doing it. And it's helping the Republicans. In Florida, since 2018, there's been like 600,000 or 400,000 net increase in Republican. The Republican to Democrat voter registration level has increased, went from 200 something thousand Democrat to now 100 something thousand, 150,000 something Republican. So there's a 400,000 swing in voter registration advantage. That doesn't just happen. And it's not like it was just the last year where the economy went poopy. It's been going on for years and years. Because people like Ron DeSantis, or love him or hate him, Donald Trump, or some future potential governors like Kari Lake, or I can't really think of any off the top of my head. There's others, but I'm blanking on them. They have a clear vision. Glenn Youngkin, he's another one. Clear vision. The different levels of conservatism, even different levels of America Firstness, because I wouldn't really say Kari Lake and Glenn Youngkin are very similar in many regards. They're very different politicians. But the uniting factor of those two, and DeSantis, is they have a clear vision of what should be. I've said this before, and I said this again. Authenticity really matters. But the next most important thing is a clear vision. You can be authentic as hell, but if no one knows what you want, or if what you want is kind of wishy-washy and technocratic, people don't vote for you. You have to have a very clear vision that people understand. So the fact that Democrats have actually been funding and helping America First candidates or MAGA candidates, I think that is not only kind of morally reprehensible to fund your opponent's campaigns, just on an ethical level, but it's insanity because you're likely replacing someone who, at best, if they won, probably wouldn't have done anything to stop you, to actually likely getting someone who can beat you. Because keep in mind, voter enthusiasm matters. And people who have clear, articulate visions have more voter enthusiasm. So, well, at the moment right now, my model has the Republicans only gaining 30 seats right now, give or take. I think this might actually go up going forward as we get towards Election Day. As long as the Republican campaign leans in to the America First element. If it shies away from it because it's scared, that's actually probably going to hurt them. But we'll see going forward. There's going to be a big election. So, before I wrap up here, I'll just note, I'm not going to do every state, but I do have a couple of the ones that have big gubernatorial and Senate races going that I'm going to be covering individually. The first one will be coming on Thursday, and that is going to be Arizona itself. I'm planning on doing Pennsylvania, Nevada for sure. We'll see going forward on other ones. I'm really interested in ones where the race looks very competitive, so I'm probably not going to do Florida necessarily because I think Ron DeSantis is going to easily win re-election. It's not going to be much of a contest. But we'll see. We'll see how much time I have and how much I can do these projects, because once I have the projections working, which I have now for Arizona, the marginal effort to do more is not too much. Now, there will get to a point where I'm spending too much of my day entering polls for all these different races, and that would be my natural limiting factor because I only have so many hours in my day, but the marginal effort to spin up a new sub-race is different. So, by all means, comment below if there's any particular states that have gubernatorial and Senate races that you want to see. I'm biasing myself towards ones that have both going at the same time first because the effort to do both is very, very small compared to the effort to doing just one. Like, it's very little extra effort. So, I'm going to go with that one first. Comment below which ones you want to see first, other than the three I've mentioned, because I'm likely going to go do those three first. The timeline, not sure. Otherwise, I hope you all have a great day, and if you liked the video, press the like button, press subscribe, and share to all your friends so they can see this stuff. Helps the channel, and it makes me feel happy. And isn't that what you want in this world? Make some bagels happy. Otherwise, though, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you Thursday with Arizona.